All right, we're going to get started with this afternoon's program. My name is Amy Bach, and I want to thank you for making the time to be with us. I want to thank our guest speaker and Team Up for putting together this educational webinar. And we certainly hope that the information that we bring you will be useful to you on your recovery journal journey and with your recovery journal. We're so sorry that you are having to, that you're in this position and you're having to put time into this, but we're so glad to be a source of information, guidance, and encouragement to you as you hopefully are moving forward on the road to recovery. So we're going to be talking today about construction financing and finishing your rebuild project. And we just a quick reminder about United policyholders. You probably already know this. We are a reputable established charity, a 501c3 not-for-profit. And we have been a trusted information resource and a respected voice for insurance consumers throughout the United States since 1991. So we have 30 years of work under our belt, doing this exact work that we're doing this afternoon, bringing nuts and bolts information and reliable guidance without any kind of sales pitch or a hidden agenda. We are an old-fashioned consumer group that has strong ethics. We don't take money from insurance companies. We have an independent voice, and we really are here to serve you. We are funded by donations and grants and a lot of volunteer labor. So Team Up is our professional staff, the government and nonprofit partners that work with us every day, and then our volunteer core, which includes previous loss survivors who learn some lessons, sometimes the hard way, on their recovery journey that they want to help you avoid, and then consumer-oriented professionals, people in the personal finance industry, people in the banking industry, like our guest, Ali Spitzer today. We also, as you may know, if you've been taking advantage of our other programs and offerings, we have lawyers on our volunteer team, claim adjusters, CPAs, and all kinds of professionals that have a heart and a mind to help consumers and disaster survivors and share their expertise free of charge. Just a reminder that we're just here to give you general guidance, not legal advice. And if you do have specific legal questions, we do encourage you to consult with an experienced attorney. One place you can find lawyers who know a lot about insurance and specialize in helping insureds, not insurance companies. You can go to our Find Help directory at our website, and you'll see some of the lawyers and law firms that volunteer and support us, and that identify as being policyholder lawyers. Again, I'm Amy Bach. I'm one of the founders of the organization, one of the people who wrote this book that you may have used. We are very happy to be joined this afternoon by Ali Spitzer, who is the Vice President of Retail Lending at Redwood Credit Union. And she has the dubious distinction of also being a person who walked the journey herself, having lost her home in the 2017 Tubbs fire. Ali, thank you so much for being with us. We also have another very special expert, Annie Barber, who is on our staff as a recovery coordinator, but also same kind of hard-earned expertise, having lost her home in the 2017 Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa as well. Thank you, Annie. And then we have Val Brown, our senior program officer, and Val has been in the social services world for a long time. We worked a number of wildfire recoveries together before we got her to join our team, and we're so grateful to have her. So between all these folks, we have a lot of information to share and a lot of understanding of some of the questions that you may have and the the reasons that you may be here today. So if you do have questions, we encourage you to type them into the Q&A. We're going to get through our slides, and then we will do our best to answer all your questions. So again, thank you for your time. We're going to be covering today some of the pitfalls to watch out for as your construction project gets towards the finish line. Some of the considerations if your house is really close to ready and you want to move there before you've got your final everything all buttoned down, and what might happen in that situation, expectations between you and your builder, resources if things don't go as planned. We will cover liens, lien waivers, lien releases, completing your rebuild finances, and then a few kind of final step considerations. So just a few more words from me before I turn this over to the team. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary for some of you, or an anniversary that that typically will bring up anxiety and challenges. And if you're at your if you're at the 2-year anniversary or the 3-year anniversary, it's been a long road. And so the anxiety to get home may propel you to accept lower standards than you paid for. And we're here to kind of rally you along so that hopefully you won't have to do that. Because once you do near the end of a construction project, you need to just keep patient and slow your roll so that that you keep making good decisions, which is hard in your situation when you have when things have been turned upside down and you have so many things that are different, and of course with COVID and on top of it. But once you see these things when you get home, if you have accepted lower standards, there will be some frustration, and we're hoping to help you avoid that situation. So Annie, what are we looking at here? Are these folks, what's going on?
These are a wonderful couple that lost their home in the 2017 Tubbs fire. And they've done everything that they can to mitigate this situation as intelligently as possible. So they're at 85% on their rebuild, and thankfully they're at 85% as to how much money that the builder has. But the builder wants them to release all of their money, even though it's not complete. And so for the last 9 or 10 weeks, he has locked them out of their own house. This is called holding people emotionally hostage. And a lot of people cave under these circumstances. So just know that there's a lot of different moving parts in this process. And you really have to try to stay strong and know what your resources are.
Let's talk about wrapping up your rebuild.
Yes.
What are some of the steps here?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the construction, things to be aware of. Consider a private inspection before your final payment. And Annie's going to share some reasons for that. And you also want to be on site for that inspection so that you understand exactly what it is when you're going back to your contractor. There's a big difference between your temporary occupancy permit or that final certificate of occupancy. So you need to understand which you have and what's going on. And then being aware of lien releases so that when construction's finished, you need to know that information that they've been done and you want to be provided those. And Annie, I'm going to turn that over to you to elaborate on those.
Thank you. So private inspection is an added cost to you, but it's really only in your favor. City inspections and county inspections have a very low minimum standard, and they're just to code on much of it. So to have a private inspector come in and make sure that you know what you're getting, what's good, what's not, and being there to have that communicated to you gives you some power with your builder. It also lets you know exactly where you're at. Moving on to the occupancy.
Well, before you do, I'm sorry, how does somebody find a private inspector?
Good question. in my opinion, word of mouth is great if you're in a neighborhood that has already had to deal with some of these issues because they've already vetted a lot of the private inspectors. For myself, I used one who I Googled and then went in and interviewed.
Okay,
So that temporary occupancy, as opposed to the final certificate of occupancy, it's a big deal. Our city was allowing us to move in with a temporary occupancy, and everybody thought that was just really exciting because they got back home. What we didn't know was that once we got that temporary, the city had no power to force the builders to actually get finaled. So you're just kind of left there. Temporary as opposed, so the temporary is means that all of the safety features are done. You have your driveway, you have your lighted numbers outside. You know, it's not exactly the finishes. It's not your baseboards. It's simply that your home is safe to live in. If you can hold out for that final certificate of occupancy, it gives you much more leverage with your builder.
so it would, I mean, Ally, if a customer has a loan with your bank, will you guys provide an inspector?
So we do, it's interesting, if you're doing a true construction project of a new build, we do send inspectors out for every draw. But to Annie's point, we're looking for a percentage of completion. So has it been done? We're not looking, and this is often where sometimes it can be a rebuild of a fire build or just a traditional putting up a new home. People lean back on the bank thinking, well, it's not the right floors that I wanted, and it's not the quality I want. That's not the type of inspection we're requesting. You can ask those, and if we know there's issues to be found with the contractor, but mostly it's a percentage of completion. So it's to the person's benefit. If it's the wrong carpet but it's fully installed, that's what we're expected to be paid on. We don't know that it's the wrong carpet. If somebody steps in and pays for something, it should have been paid for the contractor. Us and the inspection company would not know that without input. So yeah, it's important to kind of follow along. Our process includes asking for the borrower's authorization so that they acknowledge each draw. And if they can see the inspection and all that, we show them that information. As far as the lien releases, most banks will also collect unconditional waivers as you go along. And then prior to final payment to the contractor, you get all the lien releases on file. The problem is if a lien release didn't make it to the bank, because the homeowner gets it, the contractor gets it, and the bank gets it. If it does not make it to the bank, we would not know unless the member or the contractor provided it to us. So it's very important that if you get those certified pieces of mail, you share it with the bank as well. Those are just kind of common pitfalls.
Yeah, and Annie, if you don't have a loan and you're using your insurance funds, now I hear Ally saying, we're looking at quantity more than quality, like quantity of the job finished, right? What percentage is done? You're talking about a private inspector looking at quality of the work, correct?
Absolutely. And if you're using your insurance money, you really should look into an escrow account where the bank will not allow the builder to get ahead financially of where their build is. So if they're at 10% of your build, they shouldn't have more than 10% of your money. That's really important because once they get their money, they don't have a reason to come back necessarily.
And that's what we do in the restricted escrows, is also do that same draw process as a new construction build. You're going to get the invoice supported by the inspection, and they're not pre-billing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Annie, there you are thinking, oh, okay, I've got temporary occupancy. So your recommendation that people not move in until a final, or is there something you can do if you want to move in at the when it's not quite done to protect yourself?
There really is no protection. Temporary occupancy, many builders just walk away after that, and the city has no oversight in that. California State Licensing Board hasn't been real effective because they only take care of fraud, and it's not fraud if they walk away.
Okay,
It's just not completing the job.
yeah. Okay, can we explain lien releases before we get into any more details? So
It's
just
a
in
little
case
further in the presentation.
Oh, okay, okay,
We
okay,
do a
great. All
deeper
right.
dive on these, yeah.
Okay, okay. So we ready for the next slide?
Yes.
Okay.
And so actually, this is an example of a private inspection report. And Annie, I'll let you walk us through this. There's 2 slides here. So this is the documentation. And I just want to call out before Annie starts, you know, item 1, installed incorrectly. I don't know if anyone in the room knows what a valley roof rafter looks like, but I will tell you, I have no idea. My grandfather was in construction. My brother-in-law runs a construction firm. No idea what that is. And I would never be able to tell a contractor did it wrong. And that's why there's such a value in having that private inspector who knows what it should be.
Absolutely. You know, there comes a point where you just have to let the professionals and the experts take over for what we don't know. And rebuilding is not something that I ever desired to do or have the knowledge to do. So this is just one build. The valley rafter near the front entrance was observed to be installed incorrectly. Now, everybody is thinking, what are they talking about? It's the roof. Because of the 2 different roof pitches in this area has incurred a problem with the gutter system attaching to end of roofing rafters. If this problem isn't resolved, leaking may occur from the gutter system in this area. This could result in water damage to roof after ends and roof sheathing. So I don't even need to read all of these. You know, basically it says that the fire sprinkler plumbing penetrates the weather barrier, which can cause water compromising. The voltage wiring was installed for doorbells. It's not there. And they don't know if it just wasn't in the design or if it was missed. These are things that you and I would never know to look for. You just look at your roof and you see you have, it's got a roof on it. But
Right.
when you find out that the water's not draining properly and it's going underneath your roof and into your home, then you have a major problem.
So this is an example of what a private inspection report looks like, and you can see the value that it gives you. Anything else you want to hit on this, Annie, or should I move on?
Move on, please.
Okay.
So these are the pictures that they took of this in this example. And these are the things that are wrong. What they determined actually after they started taking this roof back and trying to fix this problem was that the builder hadn't even nailed down that sheet of plywood properly underneath those shingles. So, you know, they can do a report on what they see. They can't do a report on what they don't see. So when you get a report and they says that there's some problems, you may have more problems underneath that. Next.
Yeah, the next slide. So this is, these are tips that we had asked a lot of our 2017 disaster survivors to share what you needed to know, right? And so first advice is being mindful of change orders and their impact on your final bill. Your contractor may or may not call out what that's going to do to your bottom line and your budget, but you need to be doing the math and tracking that. Being very aware of the terms of your contract. Especially with regards to rapidly changing material costs. If your contract was all inclusive, and Annie, I know you can talk about this a little bit more, it may be that they're not passing those over, but if there's language there that doesn't protect you, you need to be aware of that, because you might want to say, I don't want you buying this right now. I want to hold on this piece, or can we move until the market stabilizes, like for lumber, for whatever. Biggest thing to be aware of is do not allow them to get ahead on the draw schedule. And Allie mentioned this earlier, and even if you don't, you could still potentially be locked out. But if you get ahead, then they don't have an incentive to finish the work. And so if it's in your contract, just making sure they fulfill the entire contract. Annie, anything to add here?
I would just like to say that the builders who came in and said something like, how much do you have in your insurance? oh, we can build you a home with that money and we can do all of it. And at the end, they couldn't. And so they might leave some major things like your landscaping, your sidewalks or driveway off of it because your money's gone. And you won't know that until you get there. Next.
Okay, next slide.
Yep.
All right, so checking your contract, knowing what's there, what is your overhead and profit, what's the schedule, and then what's not there. Do you have penalties or no penalties for not being in on time? Is there a finish date, an end date, a start date? And this is, at this point, most of you already have a contract and we're aware of that. But contract review is a key part of entering into these negotiations. It matters so much to have that expert. It's just like when we did the disaster taxes and John Trapani said, if you need braces put on, you're not going to the foot doctor, you don't go to the podiatrist to have the orthodontic work done. You need to have the right professional with the right tools for what you're doing. And because these are things that you might need an expert on, and in these legal contracts, knowing where you stand is key. Annie, anything you'd like to share on that?
Just that if you didn't get your contract reviewed before you signed it, there may come a point, any point in your build where you might want to have it reviewed. So at least you know where you stand and what your rights are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people develop a relationship with the contractor. It's friendly. You try to, you're seeing them all the time. Human beings, you may not want to kind of get it crosshairs, and it can be helpful to have a third party to kind of, really call out what the items are that need to be fixed. And Allie, we heard about, private inspection. We saw the example of the report, but that's one of your bank's roles as well, right? Is to.
It is, we look at the contract, however, we're not attorneys, so you can't rely on the bank. So it's more prudent to go out and get an actual attorney. So if somebody advises us, because there's pitfalls, we're looking for the contract to be assigned to us so that if something goes wrong with the borrower, we can step in and finish it for them. And on a rebuild, if it's through an restricted escrow, we really have limited options to do much on the contract and who you selected. But a true new construction build, you have to approve the contractor, you have to look at the contract. So I would say, yes, the bank will look for certain elements of the contract, but they will not be your legal representation that can see the pitfalls. There's intricacies, like if it's a rebuild in some counties, there's restrictions. Deposits are not supposed to be done, but it's even more strict and a bigger issue if it's a rebuild. So there's some big penalties that come along with that. So don't rely on the bank.
And just know that a good attorney will tell you, I didn't know what I was looking at in my contract. He will tell you what, or he or she will tell you what is in the contract, what isn't in the contract. You have no idea what should be there, and you won't know if it's missing.
And we're not talking about insurance lawyers. We're talking about construction lawyers, right? This is a different category of lawyers, right?
And I see we have that question in the Q&A, and maybe Annie, you can provide some help on that. Where do you find a construction attorney that will review those?
For our area, we were very fortunate that a few of us knew attorneys who either wrote contracts for our builders, so they were very familiar with contract review and construction review. But you could also ask your contractors. What's the word I'm looking for, you guys? The
local builders association.
Local builders, yes.
Yeah. Like a builders exchange.
Yes.
So they sometimes they're called the BIA, Builders and Industry Association. Sometimes they're called the Builders Exchange. They have different names, but it's the trade group of builders in your area, which generally is going to be a good source, because those are people that pay dues to be part of a professional group, and right there, that kind of makes them a little bit better than the average bear. Annie, did you want to talk about the free resources that you can get from the Contractor State Licensing Board, or what you can and can't expect?
I think that what you need to know about they are advocates. Oh, the Contractor State Licensing Board.
Right.
Okay, so the Contractor State Licensing Board is a tough nut. If you end up with some problems, the way that it technically works is that the city is supposed to send your complaint on to the Contractor State Licensing Board. And theoretically, you file a report and they should get a hold of your builder, and your builder should come out and make it right. That's how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, what happens in many cases is the contractor may not even reply. But if it's not fraud, the Contractor State Licensing Board will not move it to the DA. If your contractor shows up and doesn't do a darn thing, a lot of the times the board will just drop your complaint and you'll have to refile. So it's kind of a frustrating situation, but I really have to impress upon you that if you do have a problem, you do need to use those resources to get to the end result. And
we do outline that in some detail a little bit later in the presentation, but one of the resources they do provide is this consumer guide that talks about the terms of agreement and what is good in what should be included in your contract, things that set you up for success, right? So this example, brand X kitchen faucet in style A and color B, versus we're going to install a kitchen fixtures, detailing out at least what your expectations are on the quality of the finishes and fixtures.
So are we, if let's say someone's watching this and they didn't have a lawyer look at their contract, but now they've got that contract and maybe they would like to make changes to it, or, is this website a place where somebody can go to kind of compare their contract to what it could say? What is the value of this link?
They have aggregate like model contracts, the lien releases, those types of documents that are standard and required by code to build for contractors in the state. And so they provide the guidance to the contractors on the one side and the education, but they also provide for you as a consumer how things work. And then like Annie shared, they have that process they'll walk you through where they're able to help you advocate for yourself, to walk through that process and see what's available there. So there are some good resources on there that show you what things should look like. But as Annie mentioned, being able to reach out to your builders association in your county to see if they have people that will do that, because a lot of times they will have retired contractors and other people who are part of it, or active people who are willing to do that for you. And so if you can't find that that contracts attorney, if you can find that professional to do that, that would be, it should be just as good, if not better.
So go back to not the Contractor State Licensing Board, but your local builders exchange,
Yes.
or whatever that trade group. And
Yeah.
and Annie, how did you find, or do you remember how you found the builders exchange in your area?
I found it because I knew one of the builders, and he talked about rallying the troops to rebuild our neighborhood. And but I can also tell you that the attorney that I use in my life he reviewed my contract, and he very graciously, he is the volunteer attorney for the contractors board, and he very graciously reviewed a lot of people's contracts for free.
Great.
And that happened in 2007. We had one of the officers with the group basically they weren't building, they were in a different career path, but they were still active in the association. They did contract reviews, they were checking licensing for people. Making that ask in your community can potentially leverage some resources for you that you might not have been able to get for just yourself, but because you're making that ask, they create more resources for you in your community. And if we can go to the next slide, just to identify those types of problems, like I mentioned before, the level of fit, finish, the quality, You want that end product to meet your expectation that you outlined in the beginning with your builder. Did they install the materials you picked out, or did they substitute lower quality products? And that seems like it wouldn't happen, but I had a friend who rebuilt in 07, and she had actually paid for herself and got this beautiful countertop because she was underinsured, and so she was managing it, and so she got it at a closeout, and she gave it to the builder to install, and when they show up, it magically had disappeared, and there was a Korean countertop that was not at all equivalent. And it wasn't the builder, it was the sub that had been given the materials, and like, well, they'll never know. And it's like, no, they know. And so you do have to advocate there. Another thing that happens is, are they pulling resources away from your build to start on a new project? Your ALE is the clock is ticking, and so you need them working on that project. And that's a problem with the builder that you might have to negotiate, which is why if your contract has an end date or has penalties for not moving along at a certain point, you can move them along. And as Amy shared earlier with that photo that we began with, some will hold you emotionally hostage.
A lot of people I've seen with the rebuilds, the individual will go outside and start buying things, and then it's part of already the contract, and then they start to buy, upgrade, pay for it. And so it becomes a battle, sometimes often left to the end to get a credit towards the contract. So if people are buying something that's supposed to be supplied by the contract, you want to be careful with that as well. I mean, it can often speed it up because, I'm going to go get them, maybe I'm going to bid, but make sure that it's not in the project, because that can get kind of complicated.
Yeah. And I think, I'm hearing a theme that I recognize that, often in the aftermath of disasters where there's not enough local professionals to do, to meet the need, there'll be problems with people coming in from out of the area. But then there may be some local builders that with the best of intentions, they want to help. And so then, they'll say, yeah, well, I'll do my best to make this work with your budget. And then maybe, they turns out that they were wrong. And so, looking for resources in that situation, that's why we're doing this program.
That leads us into how to break up with your builder if you need to. So again, going back, reviewing your contract with legal, if you're looking at your builder is not working out, you need to know, do you have an out? And it's difficult to decide, I'm going to break up with my builder. So, suggesting you discuss with your builder first. There's 3 options, right? Will you complete the work? It's like, can we just finish the relationship and be done? Will they leave the work voluntarily and just separate and say, okay, we've agreed to, we're going to stop now. You're paid for what you're owed, and I'm going to have somebody else come in and do it. And then if you're going to go any other direction, which is the firing of them, you've got to gain legal control of your property by getting the permit in your name. And Annie, can you walk through the options here?
So there's a few options. You can, so the first thing you do is you file with the California State Licensing Board. And if that does not take you where you need to go, a lot of the times the contractor's state licensing board will recommend or say the only thing you have left is mediation. Mediation will basically get you up to $15,000, which is the bond that your builder has put into place to build your homes. Unfortunately, if somebody else has gotten to that bond before you did, there's no bond to be had. But let's just say that there is that $15,000. Then the Contractor State Licensing Board actually pays for the mediation. And if they rule in your favor, your builder is required, the bond company that your builder has used is required to send you that check. Arbitration's a little bit different, and I believe you can get more money from arbitration. But again, you have to be able to prove your case, and you can only get what they have. Small claims court, again, there is a limit to what you can get in small claims court, and I'm not sure what that limit is right now, but it would be an option if the bond was already gone. And the final one is hire an attorney. I'm going to tell you that the reason you do your homework up front is because you don't ever want to have to hire an attorney for more than just advice when you're at this stage. And the reason is because they will normally charge you at least as much money as you're behind, if not more. We have a case here in Santa Rosa where somebody has spent $500,000 on legal fees, and that's a lot of money. So you want to do the homework before, and even if you're halfway through your build or 3/4 of the way and you're not sure what's in your contract, get that checked out so you at least have a leg to stand on when you're talking to your contractor.
Yeah, next slide. And so this is just to walk. This is the state contractors license board with the information they've got. And Amy, if you go to the next slide, this gives you a little bit of information about the arbitration.
So just remember, the CSLB is a state agency, so they're a government entity. And like a lot of government entities that provide free services, there's a limit to what they can do for an individual. So it's kind of like what we say to people about filing a complaint with the Department of Insurance. They're not going to be your private attorney. CSLB is not going to be your private attorney, but they can certainly help get you into this dispute resolution process.
Yeah, and this is their arbitration program. So, but the order we gave, you're starting with mediation. So they offer a mediation program. They will route you to small claims court next if you're on their website. Then they'll walk you through their arbitration program. And there's one more option there before you would go outside for an attorney. Allie, anything you wanted to add here? All right, well then we're ready for the next slide, I think.
We use that website just to check and validate just the same. So it's a good resource.
Okay.
Yeah, normally we are telling people just to make sure that their contractor is licensed and use the CSLB website to check that and verify that. But yeah, back to you, Val.
Yeah, and so like I said, there's two arbitration programs they have. There's a mandatory one, which is for minor damage amounts, and then a voluntary one. And so they have a pretty stringent criteria to qualify. Recommend that you check out their website, you call them if you've got any questions about that. But do start at the beginning with that contract information, because you want to know where you stand and what options you have. And our next slide is just it's that opportunity to take a deep breath. Everybody just pause. It's a lot to cover. And if we've walked you through firing, the idea of firing your contractor, it's a little angst inducing. So I'm going to be quiet for a second. All right, and then our next slide, and Allie, I'll start to the next.
So before I just want to give Redwood Credit Union a little bit of props. They're a lender in a community that and they actually have been in a number of wildfire impacted communities. They, after the Valley Fire, after the Tubbs Fire, the Atlas Fire, the Kincaid Fire, Redwood Credit Union has really shown a commitment, I think, not just to helping their customers, but also to helping the community at large. So I wanted to acknowledge that and thank you, Allie, for being with us today.
So what typically you have Redwood Credit Union, I'll say, is a membership-based credit union. So we do mortgages. So we had a big impact to our membership that had mortgages with us and they needed to rebuild. Typically, it does benefit somebody to have a local connection. I'll give that plug because I did not have my mortgage when my home burnt, and my escrow was set up with a company that I did not have easy access to. And so that process became kind of daunting to not know who you did. So it does benefit yourself to kind of look around and see where your mortgage is placed and see if it's a local resource, because when you need them and you want to get connected with them, you don't want to get hung up in a phone tree. You want to just talk to someone. So typically what happens is an escrow gets set up, and it's so your insurance will pay out on the dwelling. And if you choose to rebuild, it needs to go into an escrow. If you use the proceeds to pay off the home, then that's what you can do. But any proceeds to go towards rebuilding will go into a restricted escrow account that the bank will help you control and fund and make sure. So all those things that we've been sort of talking about will start to occur when you put together this fund. So insurance proceeds kind of get received, you sign them over, it'll be made out to the lien holder. This is different than, I think people get a lot confused with, personal property money that's yours. That's not something the bank, and it's what wouldn't be written out to the bank. But even if you just suffered damage to your home, like a flooding or something of that nature, those funds are going to be issued to the bank and to the lien holder on file and to you as an individual. So those proceeds will get put into an escrow. And then you'll go through a normal draw process that we were talking about, where they'll invoice, the contractor is performing work, and they are requesting payment after, so in the way of a progress billing for work that's been completed. It typically will take a cycle. So you really want to look at the contractor's financial wherewithal to carry the project, because they are not, they should not be pre-billing. So they're out labor, time, materials. So and they then bill the bank. The bank goes out and sends inspections, collects necessary lien waivers that may be out there for somebody who's pre-liened the job, like such as some contractors. So that process, I tell people, takes, well, for the bank to pay, it should only be a few weeks. However, they've been out money long before that. So they want to have the financial wherewithal to cover the project for 30, 60, 90 days. And that's where you start to get into some struggles with the contractors that don't have that financial.
Sorry about that.
So I don't know if that's a later slide, but that's kind of a process that we talk about.
Okay.
So then what else you've got on here? It does add protection for the homeowner, because when we're going out there, you've got, if you were writing them, if you decided to pay off your home and just use the extra proceeds to build, if you had the financial wherewithal and you didn't know that there's liens out there that could be potentially filed and you should be collecting these waivers, the bank is there to act to protect you, to get their collateral back and built, but also you back in your home. And that's really where Red Credit Union kind of grew in this process, because it's like, our intent is to get somebody back into their home, not to create financial hurdles for them, but also just to give them that balance that they didn't realize was out there. So we'll do the fund management portion of it through a restricted escrow. What else is on there? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Or do we, I think we covered everything that was on that.
Yeah, I was just
Escrow
making sure.
accounts.
You do typically interest earned on the restricted escrow, similar to what you do if you have an in-pounds account. In the state of California, I believe it's still 2%. Last time I checked,
I think
you earn 2% interest on that money that you hold in the restricted escrow. Often what will happen is, it depends on the lender. They may only hold the amount. It depends on the lender, but sometimes they'll only hold what they need to cover the loan balance and give you the over and above. Some lenders will choose to help you and facilitate the whole thing. They're paying a little more interest to do that for you, especially if you've got a big rebuild project or big insurance checks coming in. So often it's called over and above. The loan balance will go back to the member. You use those funds first, and then you dip into the restricted escrow. Some banks like ourselves would still help members. We call them members, borrowers, where they're paying, but they still want the inspections, the balance, the checks that come along with the bank involved in the disbursements, even if they're paying out of their own above and beyond balances.
So Ally mentioned the benefit of being with a local or having your escrow account with a local bank, which is not an option for some people.
No, it's not.
Figuring out who's got your loan now, and finding somebody there can be challenging.
Mhm.
So this is just an illustration of how you might track that person down. Anything you want to say about this, Val or Annie? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. It's if you don't have the relationship locally, it's complicated to figure out how to make this move. And so you need to know that it's a process. You'll get some documentation like this, and you need to follow up on it, because sometimes there are problems with this. And our next topic is about the draws, but getting that authorized signer to make this happen is not necessarily as easy as it would be if your loan were at your local credit union. You can't walk in the door and make it happen. You're trying to track down that right person and make it work. Next slide.
I muted myself here. I don't know if I saw this
Well,
one.
while you're digesting this and thinking about, I'll just make my little joke, which is what I got from my 94-year-old father is, don't interrupt me, I'm talking to myself.
Oh yeah, that would be me. I just missed this one, but it is, so what typically, like we talked about, after the contractors already, perform the work, okay, so a good example I always use is, I don't think you can get a foundation done for 100,000, but let's say the foundation is $100,000. They bill for 50% completion of that. So they're billing for 50,000. Typically what the bank will do is send out an inspection to go make sure that that is truly the work that's been done. And it correlates back to the percentage they say is complete. And those are needing to be, what we do, and it should be done by all lenders, is you go back and get the member's authorization to see. It can vary. Typically the member at our institution will authorize that release. If there's a discrepancy, so that the inspection come back and said that it's not 50% complete, it's only 20% complete, or a line item that's being billed for is, you sometimes have to dissect what's in that cost, because they lump them into kind of buckets. So the inspector will come back, and so there's often just what's called discrepancies. And so the bank will work through, like, is that truly what's in that line item? What items are you billing for, or provide proof that you've paid? That can often happen. Sometimes, and it's always go back to the member and ask if they're also comfortable once you've reconciled everything.
Okay.
Ally, can you answer? I just remember sometimes it seemed like the builder's not necessarily paying attention to all the details and the milestones, and they might have gone ahead on some pieces, and they want to draw for a different amount, and that really it's just driving back to them. You need to be following the contract and the milestones and not getting ahead of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. It's going to go back to the budget that they did, and what are they budgeting in that line item, and does it correlate there and to the percentage completion?
Exactly. Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. Next slide is lien waivers and releases. Going back to the state contractors license board, they put this out. This information is on their site, so for reference, we listed typically what those would be, and I know the next slide just has an example, so you can see what the standard form would look like, because as you see on the bottom of the image there, one of the forms set forth in these codes are what should be used, or some version thereof. And
so is the bottom line that any of these, any contractor, any sub has the ability to put a lien? Okay, Annie, did you want to elaborate on that? I think.
Yeah, if a builder hires a sub, and if you're a builder and your builder does not pay that sub, within 90 days, as long as it's within a 90-day time frame, that subcontractor or other builder can file a lien against your property for that money.
Okay. And this is an example, but of course there are rules about filing liens, but it seems like it's easier to file one than to get one released. Is that a fair-
Yeah.
And that's true. And even if they file them late, it's still the burden still falls on the homeowner to get that off of there.
Mhm. Okay.
And
Do
you
we
don't
wanna-
want those surprises. I mean, that's the big thing, is you don't want those surprises. You don't want them to, you know, you pay your contractor and you've paid for the materials or that service, and then you find out later that they pocketed that money and not paid the person, and now you've got, you know, this string on your home.
Yeah, when you go to sell or refinance later down the road, you have to rectify those liens that are out there. And so it's going to impact you financially down the road.
Okay, anything else we want to say about this before we move on? Okay. Gap financing options, that's a big one.
So I'll speak to our experience here over at Redwood Credit Union. A lot of people were underinsured. So if you had equity in other pieces of property, you could use those to bridge the difference. We created what was called a gap HELOC. So lending against that home that's going to be built. So it's not I'm not sure everybody's at, so it may be specialized to different lenders, but you're lending essentially against the as completed value of that future home plus the land. And to bridge that difference in the contract amount that you're short. So that was something that our institution offered, because we did have a lot of people impacted and were short for various reasons, whether it was just the insurance company wasn't ready or they were underinsured, or there was some issues in the beginning and they started with a contractor who took some of their money. And then when you go to finish your project, you're now short again. There was some items that weren't in the contract, such as landscaping and different things that they needed to cover out of their pocket to be fully done with the home. So we created a gap HELOC product that would bridge that difference for people, looking at the cost of the contract. This is what it costs to build plus the land value, kind of constructing what your future value is going to be. And it helped out many members to get them to finish their homes.
Does it also allow them to go into an escrow account where maybe they wouldn't be able to if they did not have all the money for the rebuild?
No, it doesn't allow you to set up an escrow account. It basically is like an open line of credit for them to use. So if they, for some odd reason, used it for something other than the home, we didn't monitor it, but we had sufficient equity from a lender standpoint and their ability to repay the debt. So it was more like a traditional home equity line of credit, but because the home isn't fully complete, that's hard. Yeah. You can go get an equity line, but you can't appraise it and figure out what that value is. So we created a sort of a clever way to figure out what is that future value. We'll get the contract, we'll look at what the person is building, look at the budget, and kind of do what essentially an appraiser does when they're constructing a future value. They're saying, is what they're going to do fit the neighborhood, and the value is going to be there in the end. And we use that cost value to build it. And then of course, land has some value.
And of course, you guys developed that product because you were at ground zero after a very, very large disaster, right? So, if you're in a community that either didn't have such a large disaster that, you may go to a bank and they may not have this kind of a product. But if you, Allie, would you lend, would you make, as long as somebody's a member, would you make this available to them even if they lived outside?
They have for Redwood Credit Union. And I think if there's a major disaster in an area, a lot of lenders will come together and find ways to do resources. So it's still worth researching if this something is. Our institution did get impacted. And we put this together after the Tubbs fire where 5,000 homes were burned in the area. So you had to be, you didn't necessarily had to be a member, you had to become a member. And to become a member, because there was many people that came to us that were not banking with us before that, but heard of this product and service and needed it and were in need of it. And so we didn't limit them to, you had to be a member before that. But if you're eligible for membership, which is you live or work in one of our 5 counties, then you could become a member and then just essentially apply for such gap financing.
Yeah. So more and more, certainly in wildfire prone states, I think it's getting easier to find a bank that can work with you, but I think Redwood is probably way out there ahead of, I would imagine, of a lot of other.
Yeah, and it's also what you kind of see with some of the escrow companies, especially when they will hold back a portion until the home is finally complete, but you need still proceeds to finish it and pay the contractor. The contractor, if they're not getting paid, doesn't want to keep doing the work.
Right.
So sometimes gap financing was just used to bridge that short-term difference so that they could pay the contractor 1 or 2, because the bank was choosing to hold a larger portion back until the final draw, but the contractor still had quite a bit more work to do before they got there. So sometimes that occurs with the lender. So it was few and far between, but it happened every once in a while. So you would just kind of help them get there too. Those are on usually smaller dollar amounts.
Okay.
Right. And then speaking of larger loans, so construction loan, or if you have a mortgage, how do you make all those things work? If you need a construction loan, or you've got a mortgage and you're trying to figure out how to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, most lenders will require you to keep paying on your mortgage, and then even why you set up this restricted escrow, and that's why you're going to have to. They can give you a forbearance for a small period of time usually, but you're going to be required to keep paying your regular principal payments while you rebuild. So it's kind of a little. So if you have a restricted escrow, your actual mortgage doesn't change. You're going to continue to pay on that, and that restricted escrow becomes kind of like a impound account where you pay your property and taxes out of it. It's set aside but attached to your mortgage, and those funds are going to use to rebuild the improvement. Some people do choose to pay off the lien that was there and then start over, maybe because they're building a new home or a completely different home, a larger home, or they choose that they want to work with a different lender. And so they'll elect to have do a construction loan, a true new construction loan. And those will have an interest only period to build the home. And usually 12 to 18 months for a residential build is pretty typical. And then after that, it'll convert to a permanent mortgage, just like a 30-year fixed loan or whatever you've selected. There's a couple different types. There's a one close construction loan where it's going to go through the construction phase, hit a marker, and then convert. Those are kind of a one close. There's other lenders that will do a two close. They'll give you a construction loan, and then you have to go get a takeout loan from a mortgage company. There's a bit of degree to risk because one, you don't know what the interest rate's going to be. Maybe there'll be a life change and you may not qualify. Maybe there's a downturn in the market. There's just different factors. So the one close has a little less degree for the borrower for risk standpoint. Because you know at the end what your payment's going to be. You know what your takeout financing is for that construction loan. So that's kind of the difference between it converting from a interest only to a construction perm, and then the one close construction only. There's kind of a few risks. Owner builder projects a little more selective for the lender to decide to do those because they carry a degree of risk because you have to make sure that they can carry the project. This doesn't disrupt their business. I know a lot of people call and saying, well, I'm going to I'm going to cut costs and I'm going to get it all done because I'm going to build it myself and I'm a
Yeah.
general contractor. So banks will entertain those, but they'll sometimes have you do some extra steps, such as doing an outside validation of budget to make sure that's really what it takes to build the home, because the lender's perspective is it still needs to be completed if something went awry with that person that plans to pay it back. Because everybody thinks they can do it cheaper and easier themselves.
Right.
There's
I
still
think we
costs
all,
being
yes,
incurred.
we
Yeah.
all know of people who said, I'm going to be the GC and then maybe, thought better of it. Any other?
A couple of things. So I would say usually with our experience is we offer a one closed construction loan because we have a robust mortgage department. So this sort of complements it, helping people build a home and then convert to a product. And we have a whole array of products that are permanent loans, permanent mortgage loans. They could be, ARM products, or they can be a long-term fixed rate, or they can have shorter amortization. So we have that flexibility to provide them whatever takeout loan they need in the end. I always explain to people when they call it kind of three buckets that you're looking at. You're looking at the person's ability to repay that future mortgage. Two, what are you planning to build? That's where you kind of look at the contract, look at the budget, and get it appraised for that as completed value to make sure that there's enough equity and injection, different things into the project. And then the third is you look at the general contractor to make sure that they, again, have the financial wherewithal. There's no red flags. So that we typically will approve the general contractors with an approval sheet.
Okay. All right. Well, we've talked about best practices for getting on track for financing your project. And now we're going to talk about best practices for completing your project.
Yeah, and thank you, Allie, for diving deep into that, because it's complicated, and it's so nice having the professional voice to elaborate on that.
Try to keep it high level because it is complicated.
Yeah. If you notice, I didn't even put one close and two close because I'm like, am I being too technical? So I appreciate you going there, because that's why I'm nodding along as you're talking. I'm like, I did it. I almost put it there, but it was going to make it technical, and I didn't want to make it too crazy for us.
Yeah.
So for this, we've got the three perspectives we want to talk about. So from your municipality's perspective, they're looking at building code, health and safety compliance. This does not mean they're looking at it when you have your inspection from your municipality that it's a well-constructed home. But if they uncover code violations, they can yank back your final occupancy permit. So again, that harkens back to why that private inspector makes such a difference, to save you on things that are going to pull you back. And this little vignette here is just talking about, building codes versus quality workmanship. Anything on this you want to share? I know you've got some choice stories for this.
Unfortunately, I do. We've had homes that their finals were rescinded because they won't pass the T24, the energy efficiency. And then going back through the homeowners pictures, the city approved 2x4s. And so the whole framework of the house, the 2x4s instead of 2x6s, which means that there's less insulation and it will not pass the energy codes. And then they have to make adjustments. And these kind of things can become nightmares for the consumer. And, once you get home, you don't want to deal with all this stuff anymore. But there's a huge gap between what the city or county inspectors look for and what you as a homeowner want to see in your house. But even code stuff, the city and the county will miss, and they're not legally responsible for that. They have all these nice little things that say, you can't come back on us if we miss something.
And that kind of feeds into, for those of you who've already had your municipalities inspector show up, If a wall is closed up that's not supposed to be, some inspectors are like, oh, we don't want you to have the expense of taking it down and pulling it back up. I'll just, I'll do something. That's not doing you any favors, because if the wiring in the wall is defective, you've got a problem and it can be flagged later. So, making sure everybody is on the same page there. Our next slide is going to talk about the builder's perspective. So for them, project completion means that the dwelling is rebuilt, replaced, right? They're going to schedule a final walkthrough. You're going to do that final walkthrough with them, and then you're going to give them a punch list that they're going to complete. And then they're going to ask you to sign off on the quality. Did you do everything on that punch list? And then they should pay off the balance of the utilities for the rebuild, because you're going to close that. They're going to close those accounts out. You're going to transfer utilities to your name. Obviously, this is where people get zinged sometime after they've paid off their balance. And you want to monitor the quality of your home, because you have, and there's some warranties in the state of California that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the question is, you want to monitor that quality because you want to track and see if anything's falling apart or not functioning the way it should be during the time of those warranties. And then you have this issue of, but will your contractor come back? Anything to add?
And that's where we get into the at this point, you will know who your contractor is. Read them well, know who they are, and know that if you jump the gun and you don't get everything complete, that's probably where you're going to end up.
Thank you. And then our next slide is your perspective. So again, going back to, and this is important, if the final quality is what you were promised when you're doing that final walkthrough, your punch list, all your site visits, remembering to convert your insurance from construction to traditional homeowners once it's complete, transferring the utilities, and remembering you have that year again to get this done. Our next slide is just, again, this is taking you to the California Construction Warranty Law. It's Title VII of the California Code. It's titled Requirements for Action in Construction Defects. It's very regulatory, legislatively written, so it's not the clearest thing to read. So if you go to the next slide, Amy, it will it's basically breaks this out in more plain English. It's not perfect plain English because it's still a little complicated. There's that express written warranty. 1 year is to fit and finish of floors, walls, and define fixtures. If there's defective installation, problems with complying with building codes and manufacturer installation requirements, there's 4 years after completion of the job. And then there's a structural warranty that both the contractor and the engineer are providing for 10 years for defects that might not have turned up originally. So roofing work, foundation integrity, unstable building sites. And you would think these are not things, but we just had one of the disaster survivors from, I think, 17 just emailed earlier this week saying that they were having their garage was having cracks in the concrete, and the foundation, the concrete looked like it was crumbling. And so, these things it might not happen early, but, knowing what you're entitled to makes a difference here. And then Annie, anything to add here?
Not really. I guess the only thing to add would be that you also can ask your builder, and some builders do it automatically, to go with a structural warranty company, which will give you like a 10-year warranty. They don't have real high standards, but it does ensure, it does give you a little bit of protection, because those structural insurance companies warranties, they won't warrant someone who has a lot of problems. So that's another way of vetting out a builder who isn't up to standard.
Yeah, so just to wrap with the slide.
We're not done yet with warranties.
Oh, no, we are. Yeah.
Okay, I actually feel like I want to ask this because I'm not really clear on it. So does the law that we just looked at in Title VII there, is that sort of an automatic warranty that is provided by law? So you don't have to like reach any separate agreement with your builder?
No.
Okay,
And that express written warranty, if they did not tell you that, it is implied under state law, so you still have that right.
okay. All right, so it should have been in the contract, but if it wasn't, it's still
You're
there.
still covered, yeah.
Okay, all right, very good.
It's actually one of the things the State Contractors License Board trains contractors on, is how to manage this process.
Okay,
It was interesting that they had that training there. So obviously, for any insurance questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Department of Insurance. Let's see what else we've got here. Best practices,
so we always have to kind of include this, or we like to include this because I know whether you're dealing with a lender, whether you're dealing with a contractor, whether you're dealing with an insurance company, these best practices apply. And they're a little bit, when you're dealing with a contractor who, you're interacting with all the time and maybe you become friendly, sometimes it can be, it's just not sort of a instinctual to then turn around and put things in writing, thinking, I want to try to keep our relationship harmonious. But as I think you've gotten from hearing all the material tonight is that that the best practice is to keep things, get things in writing, keep them professional, so that expectations are clear between you and the builder, you and the lender, you and the insurance company. And while we so deeply at United Policyholders understand the frustrations that come along with being a fire survivor, and the temptation, to vent and to express emotions, which is completely natural. We really encourage, especially if you're dealing with your insurance adjuster, try to stay professional. Just trying to get, instead of sending 5-page letters, where you maybe even make a personal attack on the adjuster for being lame or being bad at their job or whatever. That kind of thing is generally going to make a bad situation worse. It's much better to just keep it short. Most insurance adjusters have way too many claims on their plate than they could even handle well. So the shorter you keep it, the more likely they are to actually read it. And I think the same thing goes with people working for lending institutions or even contractors. So those are just some of the best practices that we recommend. We've got a couple of upcoming events in August. We've got another Q&A where you are invited to submit questions in advance. That's the link where you can do that. Wednesday, August 11th at 5:30 Pacific. And then we will be back on the 19th, helping you finish your contents inventory. And Val has had many, many years of experience, hands-on, sitting there with people who are having that very natural anxiety around trying to remember what your heart is working to help you forget, all the pain and the things that you lost that you don't have anymore, but that unfortunately most insurers are continuing to require you to itemize. So we will have this hands-on workshop on Wednesday, the 19th, about, and again, if you are still slogging along with your inventory, a reminder that on our website, we have a sample of a completed one. We have a sample of one that has all the items, but with no pricing to help you. And if you are still really struggling, it's always possible to ask your insurance company if they will give you somebody to help you, a content specialist to help you get the last few miles. Anything you want to add on that, Val?
No, I think that you've summed it up nicely. Thank you.
We want to thank our funders that are making it possible for us to bring you all these workshops and webinars and keep our website updated. I want to remind folks to, if I'm sure you're signed up with us since you're here, but we really appreciate you helping spread the word. So if you have friends and neighbors that may not know about us, please do let them know it's free, and all the recordings of tonight's webinar and the previous ones. People can watch at their convenience from the comfort of home. So I want to thank again Allie for sharing both her personal and her professional experience with you. I want to thank Annie, the same. You know, your information is so gold, and Val for all the materials we've presented. I think we've answered the questions that came in.
Yeah, Ally has to sign off in a few minutes. So if anybody has a question for Ally, if you'd like more information on any of these topics, please don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A now. It'll be on the bottom of your toolbar for Zoom to the left of the red button that says leave.
So we'll just wait another minute or two in case there are any questions that come in before our panel signs off. And a reminder, our website, www.uphelp.org, uphelp.org. And if you forget everything that we have said, info@uphelp.org is the email address to use for asking, and there are no dumb questions. So seeing nothing in the Q&A, I'm going to say one more thank you to Annie, Allie, and Val. Thank you, Elise Hicks, Carolyn Winter on Team Up for tech help tonight. I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you for your time. We're rooting for your recovery success. And good evening.